Episode 74 of InGoal Radio, the podcast. Welcome to the show, everybody. Feature interview this week, Scott Darling, a man that has really experienced everything there is to experience in the world of goaltending and hockey. A great interview coming up with Kevin Woodley as the two of them catch up over his career, his journey, and what he's up to now. And speaking of journey, he has a great one that is about to start. I won't give it away too much, but a really good story regarding Scott Darling and what he's up to in the immediate future, as well as on his hockey life. Here is Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison, the co-founders of InGoal magazine. Hello, gentlemen. A lot going on in the world of goaltending and the world of hockey. And let's start with goaltenders back on the ice. We're seeing phase 2 well underway. And Woody, there's some social media rumblings that you've changed your opinion a little bit as far as what type of goaltender from an experience level is going to have the best shot at dominating right out of the gate when return to play happens.
Well, I think we should couch that by saying nobody really knows what's going to happen because we've never seen this before. But I will say, and talking to some goalies and goalie coaches around the league, my opinion has changed. In the early stages of this, the first month, even the first 2 months, I kind of thought that some of the younger guys that were staying more engaged, I pointed to Carter Hart a lot because he's got a track record in the last 2 years of when he comes back from an injury, he actually plays better because he does all this extra work when he's out, all the sort of making sure he takes care of his eye training and his brain training and all those types of things. And I wondered in the first couple months if the guys who went the other way and just completely walked away from the game. We talked to Carey Price on our InGoal webinar with Eli Wilson, where he didn't even have pads with him down in Washington State where he was staying. Didn't even have his gear. Braden Holtby completely off the ice, not doing anything. I thought for the first couple of months, those were the guys that were most at risk if we came back on short notice and we're playing again after a 2 or 3 week training camp. Well, here we are 3 months later. Phase 2's just starting, or just has started. Phase 3 doesn't start till July 10th. That's the training camp. And now I think I've completely switched my opinion after talking to goalie. I kind of thought about this. It was a thought that I had and ran it by people, and they all seemed to agree. Now I'm honest. I think the guys that walked away completely because that's what they do every summer might be the best equipped to come back out of the gate. It's certainly not going to be an absolute. There's no universal rule here. But when we think of a guy like Carey Price walking away and leaving his equipment behind, that's what he does in the summer until August 1st anyways. Braden Holtby, same thing, walks away, doesn't touch the ice until August. Well, phase 2 has essentially become August for these guys. And there is enough of a ramp up, I think, for them to get comfortable. The other group, the ones that don't walk away from the game as absolutely as that type, the younger kids, they normally hit August 1st and they've done their work with goalie coaches. They've gone to camps. They've been skating maybe just once a week in June, maybe twice a week in July. They've lost all that. So their August, their phase 2 is quite unique and foreign to a lot of them. Whereas for a Carey or a Braden, it's like, hey, this is just what I do every summer. This is something I'm familiar with. And we know how much, whether it's your routine and being comfortable with it in terms of physically preparing for the season is one thing, but mentally, the confidence of knowing, hey, this is just how I've done it for the last however many years, and in their case, a lot of years, and I know I can be good out of the gate, man, that carries a lot of value. So I think I've come around on that. The guys who put the gear away for the while may actually have an advantage over some of the ones that didn't and feel a little bit of fish out of water coming back now.
How do you think, Woody, that works out to exhibition play and how much that will be compressed compared to a normal year? I mean, yes, they may have a similar summer routine now, but coming out of the gate fast is going to be even more important. So a guy who might be a little slow to come around in October, a guy who needs a little bit more exhibition game time, might not be as fast out of the gate this time, or at least it is a little different, right?
I think, and Darren, you'll probably have a feel for this down there. I wonder if you're going to see, we've seen expanded rosters up to 28. I wonder if you're going to see a lot more scrimmage type of play.
That was my thought.
Training camps. Yeah, because you're right, Hutch. You're not going to have a big ramp up in terms of exhibition games, 3 exhibition games per team. But let's not forget, regular exhibition for the NHL, frankly, the first half of it, your starter's not playing anyways. right? Like how starters typically only get 2.5. They might play 2.5, 3 starts and play 2.5 games, at the most 3 heading into a regular season. So it's not going to be that different for the starters. The big
But
difference,
compressed.
Well, I mean, compressed.
Maybe
Sometimes
not as many games.
They're 3. They're going to have to. Basically, what's compressed is they have to be in playoff form when they play their first play-in game. Whereas before, they would take exhibition games over 2 weeks.
I'm going to just jump in here. NHL training camps, some teams skate twice, and then they're into exhibition
That's what
games.
I was going to say,
This is we're probably looking at 2 weeks of camp and then the exhibition games.
So I think where the onus goes is on whether it's scrimmages or the goalie coaches. Creating game-like situations in a practice environment will be more important than ever for the goaltenders, because you're absolutely right, Darren. And we've talked about this, Hutch, before. Like, training camp is effectively 2 or 3 days now. Like, I know for the Canucks, they'll go to like Victoria or Whistler or the interior, literally 2 days, and they'll come back to Vancouver and they'll do 2 days for 2 days, do their testing, come back to Vancouver and start the exhibition game on like the 3rd or 4th day. So this is a much longer extended training camp. To maybe there's not as much exhibition and then you're into the stuff that counts. So, but you have a lot more time in training camp to get ready, and it's going to be on the goalie coaches and the head coaches to come up with a way to make sure the goalies are prepared out of
Did you just say 2-a-days? Those don't happen anymore.
2-a-days, but they split the groups. Obviously, yeah, of course. And you're right. In this
remember
day and
those?
age,
We used to do those though. That used to happen all the time.
Yeah, no. Now the only guys that have to do 2-a-days, and it's actually 3-a-days, are the media, because we have got to sit through each group 1, 2, 3 for like 4 hours and wait till we get to talk to them.
And the guy that you're doing the feature on is always in the 3rd group.
Yeah, because you're not the first group guys are the top guys, and you've already probably tracked them down in the summer and written your feature. So you're digging for the scraps that aren't going to be there when training camp starts. So yeah, hurry up and wait takes a whole new meaning as a job description in training camp.
Well, that's why Woody has to drive every backup goalie in the league home in his car. Not even just the backups. He's always waiting for that last group, and then he's got to wait until they do their work with a goalie coach, and then they have to do a few more reps for the last players out there. And by the time Woody's done talking to them, the bus is gone, and he owes them a trip home.
I wonder how you're going to do that now with
the podcast.
You're going to have to set up a COVID car with social distancing. You won't be able to just interview them in the passenger seat anymore.
Plexiglass screen in the new car.
There you go.
I'm going to have to start an Uber business.
My opinion of it is quite honestly is there's 8 weeks between phase 2 and the start of phase 3 or completing phase 3 before we get a return to play. So there's 8 weeks of goaltenders to be on the ice. I think they should all be in a decent enough groove by then. I'm not sure that there's a big advantage for a veteran or not, but I like the theory that goaltenders that walked away will be more comfortable.
Okay, listen. So here's the truth, Darren. You're probably absolutely right, but some of us have had to fill radio spots across the country for 3 months without hockey. So when I come up with a new talking point, you better believe that it is the truth. We may know the reality is they're all going to be just fine. But for those radio hits that I'm doing and getting paid to do, I need something I can dig into. So give me this one.
Well, goaltending exhibition games are going to be vitally important. There's not going to be any of these switching halfway through. Guys, the value of those 2 exhibition games is going to be huge.
And it's going to be, I want to see who gets switched once the real thing starts. Like, are we going to see the quick hooks, like Mike Keenan type stuff, guys going back and forth? Man, the margin for error has never been slimmer at a time when for a lot of teams, the gap between number 1 and number 2 has never been narrower. Outside of your Carey Price type situations, there are a lot of teams. You got one there in Vegas where you could argue who's the best goalie. And it's not just there. Like I saw, there's a list that had Tristan Jarry. Is Tristan Jarry a slam dunk starter for the Pittsburgh Penguins? Statistically, he is based on the season he had, but Matt Murray was trending up towards the end, and we all know how much Mike Sullivan as a coach, likes and trusts Matt Murray. He's got 2 cups with him. There are so many situations like
Minnesota.
That. Darcy Kemper, Antti Ranta. Minnesota, I think we all look, normally you'd be like Dubnyk's a slam dunk, but I think actually the slam dunk is Stalock out of the gate. But when you've got Doobie sitting there, that could all change based on the training camp they have, the exhibition they have. I don't think there's ever been more question marks and more uncertainty about who ends up playing a series for more teams than we're going to have this year.
Yeah, I think the quick hook changes from one game to the other. If there's an off game, you're going to see coaches make that switch. And normally you'd say, okay, if we see the backup, it's a bad thing. In this case, I think there's a lot of faith in backups that if teams are successful, you're going to need two goaltenders on a long run to be that team that has an impact in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's just the reality coming out of the pause.
Sorry, I was just going to say we're going to have some fantastic stories coming out of this because there are going to be so many curveballs coming. Who's going to be your surprise guy for the playoffs, Woody? Somebody we might not even think about.
Oh, I was just going to say, obviously Bennington went wire to wire, but we talk about this as being unique to COVID, but we're 2 years removed from Braden Holtby not starting the first two games for the Washington Capitals and winning a Stanley Cup. And if you go back over the years, Marc-Andre Fleury and Matt Murray both playing roles and getting starts in the two prior cup runs to that, all the way back to Cam Ward and Martin Gerber in 2006. Like there's a long history in between of Scott Darling, prime example.
Yeah.
Okay, he didn't start the playoffs in 2015, but our guest today, if not for him coming into that round, and when Corey Crawford scuffled a little bit in that first round and getting them past the Nashville Predators, I'm not sure that he's got a Stanley Cup on his resume. Name's not on the Stanley Cup. So there's a long list, as much as we think this is COVID specific, of the guy you expect maybe not going the whole way at least, or having two guys record wins during a Stanley Cup in the last little while. It's just going to be even more amplified. And if I had to pick a dark horse right now, Hutch, and I say this not knowing how he's ever started a season at a professional level because he hasn't started one at the NHL level. So, and I think your October track record is going to matter here, how you come out of a camp and out of the gate. But if you want a dark horse, give me Igor Shesterkin, because nobody dominated the National Hockey League like he did once he arrived. Was he 10-2? The kid just wins. There's not a deep track record to build a scouting book on him. And if he can, basically the only question mark I have about him is, can he come out and start the way he entered the Rangers midseason coming out of the American Hockey League? If he's the same goalie, he's got every much a chance of being, the story of the playoffs as any other guy. The other one would be Elvis Merzlikins, because he went on a heater there where he was 5 shutouts in a short number of starts. So he's shown that capability. The difference between the two, Igor plays behind a team where defense is a foreign concept, and Merzlikins has actually one of the most insulated defensive environments in the National Hockey League this year in Columbus.
I'm going to go Florida. I don't know what's going to happen there.
Bob's.
I know
or is this a Chris Dreger plug?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's
exactly.
it's that kind of thing. What I know, Bob's the guy, but if there's any scuffling, he hasn't had the greatest first year in Florida, and maybe something happens there. That's just my.
That'll be a very short leash.
Yeah, how short would the leash be in Florida? Because it's not as much of a tandem, but you saw Dreger take over and have a nice run.
And I know it's not a big sample size, but man, it's hard to ignore 938.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. And in the meantime, we have go ahead there.
I was just going to say the best part is we'll have something to talk about, but as Hutch said, what all these stories that are going to come out, the sad part is none of us are going to be there in person, I don't think, to write them.
And they'll happen so fast with the 24 team tournament that you'll hardly have time to chew on much before the next thing happens with 6 games a day in the early going of the return to play plan, the way that we believe it's going to be set up. This weekend, as we wait for the training camps and then the return to play to occur in the National Hockey League, InGoal magazine will keep busy with a great partnership with the Western Hockey League and Hockey Canada. Hutch, if you can just walk us through a little bit on the periphery of what's going to happen, and then Woody can dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think Woody's going to have to dive in a little bit deeper. He's sort of taken point on this. We're both involved, but Woody's been the point man, and a great opportunity for us and I think our premium members as well, because we are working with the Western Hockey League and Hockey Canada to present their inaugural online goalie coaching symposium. So there's a large collection of goaltender coaches for the Western Hockey League and a number of other representatives from across the country sent by Hockey Canada. And we are not only the presenting sponsors, but we are also working in the background to make sure that everything runs smoothly from an online perspective, thanks to all the experience we gained with all the different webinars that the three of us put on, along with all of our premium members. So thanks to all that great support we got from our membership, we've been able to sort of extend that knowledge and gain this opportunity to work with some great coaches and some great educational material that we'll be able to bring quite a bit of it to our members later on down the road.
And I think it's important to thank the InGoal Premium membership, not only for the audience and support that allowed us to invest in the webinar technology and to learn as we went, the patience as we learned a few hiccups. We basically managed to establish ourselves as having an expertise in the industry with this, enough so that the WHL and Edmonton Oilers goaltending coach Dustin Schwartz reached out about us hosting this. So we're not just the presenting sponsors of the first ever WHL Hockey Canada Goaltending Symposium, we're actually the presenters. So we'll take care of all the tech. And I think the other reason we need to thank our InGoal Premium members is for their patience, because we haven't run webinars the last couple of weekends. And a big reason why is we've been preparing for this one. Now, obviously, webinars it's not really what you signed up for at InGoal Premium. They were kind of a bonus. But the fact they've sort of slowed down the last couple of weeks is not a sign of plans to come. We've got more in the future for you. But for right now, our focus was on making sure we deliver these webinars effectively and powerfully. And of course, as premium members, we're recording them and we'll be able to share most of them with you. There are some ownership issues on some of the presenters, but we're talking about names like Dustin Schwartz, as I said, Edmonton Oilers goaltending coach, former Dallas Stars goaltending coach Mike Valley, Glenn Gulletson, an assistant coach with the Edmonton Oilers, on the relationship between a goaltending coach and the staff and how you form a strong working relationship. Hockey Canada's Tyler Dietrich is going to show us how to utilize video tools. We've got Scott Murray of the Washington Capitals. John Stevenson, who you've met through the webinars, has a new webinar presentation he'll be presenting on sports psychology of goaltending. Dave Alexander, Stanley Cup champion with the St. Louis Blues, and then a number of coaches from the Western Hockey League, Matt Wenninger, Ian Gordon, Curtis Muka, Dan DePalma, all with various presentations, including video that we will get to share with our audience at InGoal Premium, as well as wrapping it all up, a hot stove hosted by none other than Darren Millard, featuring Jason LaBarbera and one Carter Hart. So that is an action-packed 2 days. We're proud to be sponsors. We're proud to be presenting sponsors. We're nervously excited about hosting the whole thing and making sure it goes smoothly. And we're really excited that we're going to get to share so much of that content with our InGoal Premium members over the next couple of months as we roll it out, up to and including those hot stove sessions with a guy like Carter Hart. It's great. It's going to be awesome.
It is jam-packed and it's full of knowledge, and it's a multi-day presentation between the Western Hockey League and Hockey Canada, and focusing on goaltending, and between the goalie coaches and the psychologist side and the head coaching, there's not going to be any stone left unturned, and we'll make sure that all this, as much as we can, is going to be available for the InGoal Premium subscribers. It's fascinating. There's a couple of presentations in particular that I'm really looking forward to, along with the webinar.
Yeah, and we made this investment. It is an investment. Just as we invested in webinar technology, we made an investment in this sponsorship with you, the InGoal Premium member, in mind. We know that content is king, and this was an opportunity for us to access teaching content from some of the best so that we could bring it to you. So, like I said, patience on the webinars over the past couple of weekends. We appreciate it. We promise it will be rewarded.
If people want to get involved this weekend, how do they go about doing that?
In terms of the symposium itself, this is a closed environment, closed and limited to the Western Hockey League goalie coaches and the selected goaltending coaches from Hockey Canada that'll be participating from all across, right up to, I know there's some American Hockey League goalie coaches that are on the list from Hockey Canada. Our old pal Rick Wamsley is going to be part of this, tuning in. But in terms of everybody, general public watching, they're going to have to wait till we replay it at InGoal. It's not something, it's basically a closed door environment. In other words, if you want to see it, you got to wait till after it's done and then hit up InGoal Premium for your membership.
Perfect. And on the subject of content at InGoal Magazine, ingoalmag.com, Hutch, there's some great content coming out regarding parents and goaltenders and supporting our young athletes.
Well, I hope it's great. I had a moment this week that reminded me of 10 or 11 years ago when I first hit publish on the first article at InGoal, and I was quite frankly really terrified to put myself out there because you know how the internet can be. Thank heavens there wasn't Twitter back then. We've had a number of articles at InGoal Premium from the InGoal goalie dad, who is not me. Goalie dad wanted to remain anonymous because he just a little worried about putting the career of his two children out there for everybody to hear about. He's had to take a bit of a break from writing, and being the responsible dad, I decided I had to hop in there and provide some parent content, because we hear from a lot of parents, thank you, who listen to this podcast in the car as they're going to the rink or going to school with their sons and daughters, and say they really appreciate the content. But I felt that there's been a bit of a gap in terms of parent content, except for you two having to hear all about Maddie's experiences here on the podcast. So we're going to fill the gap, and I published my first article from a parent perspective over at InGoal. Already had one queued up, probably ready for this weekend, when a question came in from one of our listeners just asking me about hockey academies. And in British Columbia, where we are, there's sort of a second stream of hockey programs that are outside the minor hockey program. They are pay to play. They're not cheap, but they endeavor to provide a premium experience, and they definitely provide the highest level of competition for a number of kids. And this parent wanted to know what we thought of hockey academy experiences for goaltenders. And if you're not from British Columbia, Alberta, and some of the other places across Canada where there are academies, you know, you might substitute, do I send my kid to a prep school? Do I send my kid to another town to live with somebody and play at a higher level? Most of my answers were specific to our province and my son's own experience. But still, it's a question that a lot of hockey parents face all the time as to what the next step is for their kid if they want to sort of chase the dream. And so I have spent a lot of time looking at that, and I decided to share my thoughts with the whole audience.
Looking forward to catching up on that. I have a question for you as a goalie parent. Do you watch your son's games with the other parents, or do you stand off by yourself?
Well, most years I'm the goaltending coach on the team as well. Don't generally suggest that parents who have not a lot of experience jump in there and become the goaltending coach, but I do have a fair bit of experience, so I've been able to do that with my son's team. So that's a little different. You know, this year I was on the bench all the time. I think it really depends. I have my days that I have to be on my own. I have my days that I can be with the other parents. I do find it really hard to sit when my son is playing. I do need to sort of get some of that energy out.
I asked the question. My daughter was a soccer goalkeeper, and I always had to be at that end and by myself. And as you were talking there, I thought, geez, I wonder what Hutch is like.
I think every parent's a little bit different, and what we'll be talking about in this weekend's article has to do with the fact that you know your son or daughter better than anybody else, and I would say that plays into this decision too. There are times that I want to be near him. There are times I think he needs to be on his own to do his own thing.
What did your parents do?
My mother used to sit up in the stands and scream all the time because she was scared I was about to get hurt. And people would look at her and say, I assume you're the goaltender's mother. So I don't do that.
Send some comments. Send us your opinion. If you're a goalie parent, do you sit with the other parents, or do you wander off by yourself? Some people don't want to be around the other parents because if something not great happens, you don't want to be sitting there.
Oh, dude,
looking at.
I would be starting fights with the other parents if they were criticizing my kid on a bad goal.
Yeah.
Gloves would be off, baby.
So maybe it's better that goalie parents, goalie dads, moms sit off by themselves. My dad always stood by himself. My mom sat with everybody else, different personalities. But let us know. I'm very curious now. Hutch, what would you do if you weren't on the bench?
Well, as I say, it sort of flows. It depends on what I think he needs at the time, and I don't mean in the sense that I need to be there to support him. I mean, developmentally, do we need to take a little time away for him to not feel like somebody's watching over him? He played a game a few years ago against a powerhouse team. I'm not a shot clock guy. I never sort of count the shots in a game, but I saw the score. Huh? Woody does, yeah. But I saw up on the score clock that they were up into the 70s, and I think our team only had 2 shots on net because they'd cleared the puck the length of the ice, and it happened to hit the net. That game, I sort of felt like I had to stay off on the side with him. Sort of felt bad how it was going, but he had a fantastic game, so it was fun to be there as well. So other times I want to walk away. I actually feel the same way about videotaping games. I know some people sort of religiously tape their kids' games and let them watch them. I have times when I don't want him to even think there might be a camera there, so I don't do it. But there's other times I know he wants to see what he's up to, so I'll tape the game. It really does ebb and flow at the time.
I've never forget playing a 3-on-3 summer league game, and the kids were like, they were way younger than us, and they rope-a-doped us pretty good. And I was like, I think at one point I said to the ref, if this doesn't slow down, I'm going to have a jammer. Like, where's the defib out here? Like 3-on-3 as an old man is not a good idea. And then at the end of the game, the kid from the other side comes up to him and he goes, and he said some nice things and whatever. And I was dying. And he's like, how'd you think I played? And I'm like, dude, man, I was just trying to like keep my head like held up, not watch how you were playing, but great, good job. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to break down the tape later. My dad's up there in the bar and he's got the video camera out.
No way.
So if you guys think I take beer league a little too seriously, exhibit A that I'm not the worst. So I thought that was hilarious. Personally, if I was a parent, I've been to a couple of games, not many, but a couple where I've seen Hutch sort of, behind that, where he's not on the bench, where he's behind the bench. Or behind the glass in Maddie's end, but other games where he's up watching from above, I would be behind the other goaltender's net as a parent, whispering through the crack in the glass, Noonan.
No, Hutch is like, really? And I'm thinking, no, he'd be doing that. That might be the most truthful thing he's ever said, Woody, on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
Listen, I know I would be two things. Terrible coach with my kids. I do not help them in minor sports because I do not have the patience for them not being good, and I'm not a good teacher. So at least I'm self-aware of it. I'll be a crappy hockey dad. At least I know.
Crappy hockey dad. That there's a T-shirt made out there somewhere that you need to buy. Crappy hockey.
That's
dad.
On the front, and on the back it says one more question.
Kevin. This week's feature interview, Scott Darling. And this is a guy that rose to fame because of his appearance in the Stanley Cup playoffs with the Chicago Blackhawks, part of a Stanley Cup run. But there's been highs and lows along that road, and an incredible journey. Wild that from his college days to his first year as pro and playing in the lower leagues and finally getting that opportunity. With an organization that he didn't even belong to. I mean, there's so many levels to this onion, Woody, in this conversation with Scott Darling.
Not a lot of guys go from the Southern Professional Hockey League to the NHL. Fewer still go from the SPHL to winning a Stanley Cup, and to do so in your hometown in a hockey environment like Chicago is a guy who grew up loving Eddie Belfour. There are so many threads we could have pulled on here and come away with great stories that I wish we had more. We probably could have gone more time. We'll probably have to have Scott back on again. And the best part though is he's just a great guy to talk to.
And
he's
you really get that sense.
Guy to talk to. Yeah. And the video quality wasn't great. Maybe we'll show a few clips. Actually, Scott has promised us we're going to hook up next week with a better video reception. He's actually going to give us a tour of his sort of the office environment and show us all his old masks. He had everything. He had like gear from the Cup run. He had all the masks. He had his InGoal magazine, Bunny LaRocque top backup goaltender in the league trophy was hanging behind him from 2017. I saw Whalers themed gear that he'd had done up for the Carolina Hurricanes Whalers nights. He's going to walk us through all of that and all the specs in the coming weeks at InGoalMag.com and for InGoal Premium members. But that sort of relaxed, just hang out with us type feeling is, I hope, what came through in this interview, because that's the feeling Scott gives off every time you talk to him. You just feel like you're sitting around chatting with a really good guy who also happens to have won the greatest prize in hockey.
You will hear all about the impact of the COVID pause on both his professional and personal life in this conversation. But before we get into it, just the relationship and the way things work and the synergy and how small the goalie world is, Woody, his first set of gear comes from Source for Sports, the hockey shop.
We're pretty sure, because when you hear him describe that trip up to Vancouver, he's originally from Washington State, just across the currently closed border. But when he started describing that trip and going to this store with all this goalie equipment,
you almost burst out of your skin.
I was doing the math. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was doing the math. I'm looking at his birthday because I'm an old man, so I had to double check these things. I'm like, oh, for sure, that's the hockey shop. Not at their current location, but I'm like, that's got to be the hockey. There was no other sort of like place like that in Vancouver. There still isn't. And so I was like, that's gotta be. And so the only downside is COVID's taking them away from us right now as a sponsor. But I was like, talk about the ultimate plug. He got his start in goal. Forget the SPHL. The hockey shop with his first set of gear, the old Felix Pot. I'll let him tell the story. I'm sharing too much now, but I thought that was an awesome small world moment.
I just the complete journey of that and the tie-in between InGoal Mag, InGoalMag.com, and this podcast is phenomenal with Source for Sports, the hockey shop in Surrey, and Scott Darling. Here is the feature interview, and it's a journey, and it's fun, and if you like dogs, you like it even more. This is Scott Darling with Kevin Woodley on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
Wow, this is kind of a treat. It's been far too long since we've had a chance to catch up at the rink. Scott Darling coming into the InGoal Radio podcast live from Chicago, where I guess the first question is, because I've seen it all over social media, like celebration time a little bit, like nostalgia. I'm seeing a lot of stuff about the anniversary of the Stanley Cup championship there. What's it like for you being in the city, even though it's a weird time, and sort of reliving some of these celebrations, maybe even more so than you would if we weren't in COVID, if there was live sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, again, great to see you. It's been a minute. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's been cool. Like they aired game one on like Chicago's local station yesterday, and I didn't even know it was like the anniversary of when we won the Cup 5 years ago. But it just brings you back, and it reminds you of like that whole time, that whole year, being a part of that team, the guys, and, eventually winning a Stanley Cup. And it just, for me, I'm just like, it blows me away that happened to me, So it's been cool to watch and kind of reminisce, look through old pictures, like the week after, the things we did and stuff like that. So it's been pretty cool.
I was going to say, like as much as that was, I mean, winning a cup is the ultimate as a hockey player. To do it in your situation, in your hometown, like that's little kid dreaming, playing driveway hockey, whatever ball. Like that's the stuff of dreams and frankly storybooks. Is that how much more did it mean to do it as a Chicago guy?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's incredible. I'm still a diehard Blackhawks fan. I have been my whole life. I grew up, watching at Belfour and going to the games, and and then to be a part of it. Like I watched the first two as a fan, you know what I mean? And then to be a part of the third one, and then just everything that comes with it, not only winning, but like the next day you're walking on Wrigley Field, and I'm a huge Cubs fan. And, your family's on the bus with you in the parade, when before my family was in the crowd for the parade, just stuff like that. And remembering all that, just like you can't even put into words like how grateful I am for that entire experience.
Okay, so let's go back to that experience a little bit, because I mean, we don't let people forget, but maybe some of our listeners don't remember how crucial a role you played in it. And I think there are probably some lessons and takeaways, not to jump right into takeaways, but you come into that early series against Nashville and help the Blackhawks get through. Corey Crawford, one of our all-time favorites here, and a guy who I think deserves a lot more respect than sometimes he gets on the outside. In the goalie world, he gets it.
Yeah.
But he had it. I mean, he didn't have a great start. What about your mindset and your approach allowed you to come into that situation and that rivalry and have success? Because I think there's probably a lot of goalies that would love to, whatever you did there, be able to bottle that if they ever get thrown into a situation, obviously not in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but any situation where, it was a little bit of a surprise or it wasn't what you expected. How do you prepare for it?
Yeah, I think that's the word right there. I was prepared, like I was in game shape. I prepared for every game like I was going to play, and so, I was ready for it. I mean, mentally it was tough. Like it was overwhelming. And I like to say that I'm lucky I was so young and I was just like scared to let the team down. So that like elevated me. Cause it was only my 14th NHL game that game. And I think it's more about the preparation. Like I was ready, I was game ready to go. And I always prepared like that. And so I think that was a big part, but I also think I was a little naive and I didn't understand what I was stepping into, and that helped a little bit.
Now, were there any things you fell back on? Because like you said, I mean, okay, so you played 14 games that year, your first 14 in the NHL, but you've been a pro for a while. You've been in other situations. Again, not the same spotlight, not the same stage, but was there any tools you'd used, whether it's mentally or a routine you used to get ready to play, that you went back to that sort of grounded you, like, yes, I know this is a massive stage, but if I approach it the same way, I can handle it? Or was it just not knowing better?
Well, I mean, I wish I could give you a better answer, but until that point in my career, that was my 5th year pro, I think.
Yeah.
I had never been on like a playoff team ever.
So your first
that was
experience.
Honestly, that was my first playoff game since juniors.
Good job on the homework by me, but wow, that's a hell of a moment. So what, like?
So, I mean, and I joke that I don't even remember the game. I was so high on adrenaline, I don't remember playing that game. And yeah, people probably don't know that, but I never played in a playoff game since I was 19 until then.
And boom, here you go, Nashville Predators. One of the, I mean, I don't know if that rivalry's faded.
When I was 20, I played one playoff game against BU and got crushed. But other than that, I hadn't played a pro playoff game until that one.
Wow. And like I said, Nashville, like one of the biggest rivals at the time of the Blackhawks, and down in the city, like, holy smokes.
Yeah, and the year before I played for Milwaukee, so all my former teammates were on the other team.
Any benefits there? Was there, I mean, any
no,
could you take any comfort in knowing shooters or tendencies at all, having been on the other side?
No, maybe it just ramped me up a little bit that like I really didn't want Forsberg to score me, because we were roommates the year before, like in a hotel room, and like we're like great friends, and like really dialing it in on those guys so that they couldn't hold that over my head the rest of my life. But he did a hat trick on me in Game 5, so whatever.
I mean, it's Forsberg, right? So those are some nasty handles. Okay, so the other part of that is you'd been up with the Blackhawks for parts of that season. You played the 14 games, had success. So you had that, like you said, under your belt, that comfort level, and you were playing well and you were prepared. But you talk about being prepared to go into a game. The life of a backup, which was the role you'd served for the most part to that point, is not one that often lets you prepare for games, or guys have to find ways to feel prepared for games because there is an element of, target to that job. How did you balance that that year, but even at different points throughout your career, Scott? Because we get this a lot where, I get stuck in to do the drills that nobody wants to do and things like that. Are there ways you can manage that to make sure you're still working on your craft and still being there for the guys, and then, like you said, ready to play in a playoff game like this?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I'd have to tip my hat to my goalie coach, Jimmy Waite, at the time, because like he made sure that we had our time to do the real work, like goalie work. I was out before practice every day. At life of a backup, you're first on, last off.
Right.
And I did that for 3 years in Chicago, and even into Carolina, I still kind of did the same thing. But so he did a great job of like keeping me ready that way. And then obviously, you kind of got to do the work that you don't want to do in practice, and, have the bullseye on your head the whole time and stay after with the scratches and do all that. So, I mean, the only thing I was worried about was like my energy level because, as a backup, you get bagged like every day. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but, that's the life that you chose. And I don't complain. I loved it. But, once, it got into like me playing, I'm like, hey, I can't do the extra 45 minutes a day. I need to save my energy for the games kind of thing. So, but the coaches were great and Jimmy was great at making sure, like, even leading up to that, before the playoffs, making sure we still had our goalie time before practice to really work on what I needed to work on and what Corey needed to work on.
No, I know that evolves over time. When you talk about what I needed to work on, our foundation as goalies, I think, evolves over time, no matter what level you're at. Do you remember maybe back then or even now, are there drills that sort of, hey, if I do this and I'm feeling good about this part of my game, I can translate that into a game? Are you one of those guys that sort of finds a few staples, or whether it's crease movement or a particular shooting drill where it's just like, hey, this is me. This is what gets me into my game. And is it important as you move around organizations since Chicago to make sure each goalie coach sort of knows, hey, this is how I prepare. Let's work together to get there.
Yeah, it's great to have that conversation and like the open relationship. Like when I went to Carolina, like I had a say in with Mike Bales coming in because I knew him from when I played in Wilkes-Barre and loved working with him because like you need to have that dialogue. I didn't want to work with like a tyrant who told me what to do because like every goalie is unique, and I'm like, I think I'm actually unique because I'm so big and I'm not like, I don't play like Ben Bishop, like I'm not a take up space, kind of use my body type of guy. I'm just kind of like, I like to call myself a bad Pecorine. That's what I am. And because I'm not Pecorine, I attempt to be Pecorine without the great glove hand. But yeah, I have my staples that like make me feel good and make me feel comfortable. But for me, I like to watch a lot of video and I look for trends. Even if it's not a goal, like the way I make saves, like if I'm doing something wrong, I could talk to Jimmy and be like, I've seen this happening a few times. Like, let's work on this. And then the goals too, if like there's a trend in the goals in my last 5 games, like let's create some drills to work on this. And so that's kind of how we operated.
Can you give me an example of a trend? Like, obviously it's way back, but like where you spotted, like, are you mean like, hey, like I'm getting beat on, a short side walk off the wall from the dot, or
off the top of my
low
head,
high plays? Or
I remember one time where I was getting beat. It was like 5 games. There was like 3 goals where it's low to high, like a pass from below the goal line, and I'm drifting out. I'm not getting my feet set, And so I was drifting and I couldn't react as fast as I wanted to. And so like, that's an example of like, we just did low to high plays for like a couple practices, in our goalie time. Just stuff like that.
And feet set is such an important part of it, right? It doesn't take much drift to the difference between even a little bit of drift as that release is coming and being set. I'm guessing we've heard this a lot lately. That's the answer for a lot of guys. Yeah. And just getting that muscle memory, doing it 100 times, like digging in, not drifting, and that's kind of how we work, and that's how. And I know there's other examples I can't think of off the top of my head, but that's kind of what we did. And you just do that 100 times over 3 or 4 days, and it's like built right back into you. That's what you need to do when you're not thinking in a game. Your body just needs to know what to do. So how much video do you still watch of yourself? Did you watch then? Like, is this taking it upon yourself to sort of be your own goalie coach, know your own game, look for those patterns and those trends?
Well, I mean, in the NHL, it's pretty good. Like we do a lot of video.
They make it easy for you to find it. Eh?
Yeah, they make it pretty easy for you. They set you up for success is what I like to say. But yeah, I mean, this past year was tough. I was playing in Austria. We don't have the same angles, the same access and stuff like that. So like I literally couldn't really watch my games. So it was different, but in the NHL, it's pretty easy to like, they send you all your clips and you go over with your goalie coach and just run through everything. Every time you touch the puck, the whole game, whether it's playing the puck, making a save, goals, and you do that. I mean, after every game,
you're logging in. There it is. It's all laid out for you.
Yeah.
That's like young goaltenders' dreams.
Yeah, I know. And then you have it for yourself too. So like, because I was like crazy about it. So I'd watch it with Jimmy or Mike, and then I'd go home and watch it 10 more times myself.
Now, did you have to find a line there, Scott? Because sometimes, what's the phrase, paralysis by analysis? Can you think too much about your game and get a little vapor locked by it? Or was it always, was more information always a good thing for you?
No, it wasn't always a good thing. I think as I got older, I started to like let go a little bit more, because like you need to have like work-life separation, right? You can't be obsessed about it, especially as a backup when you only play once every 2 weeks. You can't be obsessed for the 14 days in between your games. You know what I mean? So like I started off that way, and then I think after my second year, I was like, I need to like calm down, because like I want to have a life too. And then, I mean, my third year was my best NHL season after I kind of like did that.
Learn to leave it at the rink at times. So you can still do the work, but there must be a point where it becomes counterproductive.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me,
that's now speaking of video, you're getting to watch all this video and all these games being replayed. Like you said, as a fan, as they go, it sounds like you said they're going through the series. Obviously, the anniversary of the Cup win was just the other day. Yeah. Have you been watching throughout, or you just started? Like, what's the feeling of watching yourself play? Like, do you put yourself in fan mode if you watch those games against Nashville? Are you making saves on the couch, man?
No, I'm critiquing myself.
Really?
I was watching last night with my fiance, and I was like, bad rebound. Because I've actually never watched it, like, the whole thing. I've seen the clips, but I've never watched it, like, the whole game with with the commentating and everything like that. So, yeah, it's a unique experience. It's kind of funny, because they just did the other two, the 10 and 13 series, and I didn't really watch any of those. But, I mean, obviously now in times we're missing sports a lot, and this one I'm actually involved in, so I'm like, okay, like I'll watch. But yeah, I'm like on the opposite. I'm like, should have done this,
I was gonna say most guys are probably listening to see if they were taking too much crap from the commentators. You're actually giving yourself more crap than the commentators probably are.
Oh, Eddie Olczyk and Pat Foley loved me. We're boys. They were always good to me.
Nice. So what are you up to now? And obviously, part of that question, we can't avoid it right now with everything that's going on with COVID. Like, how have you been directly impacted, not just day to day, but personal life, but in terms of planning for the future? I saw on Instagram you just managed to get out on the ice recently, probably for the first time. Catch us up with what you're up to and where you're at, and how this has affected it.
We'll go hockey first, life second. So yeah, I just had my first skate. And now it's time to like start really getting into it and finding guys to shoot and stuff like that. But lucky for me, my fiance and her twin were both D1 hockey players. So they came out and shot on me. So we had a lot of fun with that. And like I said on Instagram, the first skate's always the hardest. Let them take 1,000 breakaways on me. I was dying afterwards. But it affects me because I want to play in the U.S. next year. But obviously they have bigger fish to fry right now than signing a 2, 3, 4 goalie for their system. So, it's kind of a wait and see and planning for the future. So that's another aspect that COVID's affected me. But I'm happy that they have their plan to play and like they're getting going again. It'll be weird to watch hockey with no fans. And I'm sure it'll be tough for the players too. Like I couldn't imagine really doing that. But yeah, personal life, I had to cancel a wedding.
That's kind of a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That's a big one.
So we had to call an audible. We rented an RV. We're driving out to Montana. We rented an RV for the month of July, and we're just going to go out west with the dog and elope and try and make lemonade out of lemons. So we're excited about that.
That doesn't sound like a bad alternative plan. Although I hope the RV, having seen Moose on Instagram, I'm hoping the RV is a big one.
Yeah, 29-footer. It should fit Moose. And then, like we talked about off air, I'm getting another Great Dane, and I'm picking him up in Utah. So it kind of just worked out perfectly. It's on our way. So we get to pick up Gary in Utah, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited to get married, excited for a little adventure because we've been cooped up. in the house. I like to say we're double quarantined because my fiance is a COVID testing nurse.
Wow.
And so that's what she does. So we try and stay away from people as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, you're getting a taste of what the front lines are really like there, and probably have a better, I don't know how to say better, but you have a more firsthand perspective than a lot of us in terms of just how serious this can be.
Yeah, firsthand, and more knowledge too, because she knows so much about it, and she can like inform me about what we need to do and like how to stay safe and stuff like that. Obviously, things are slowing down, and I'm happy the world's starting to kind of go back to normal. I don't think it'll ever go back to normal, but it's a little more normal than it was. So that's been nice, and it's nice to feel comfortable getting out. Like we rollerblade like 3 times a day. That's like all we do. We just rip around the city. But yeah, so it's nice to be able to get outside, and yeah. Other than that, we've just kind of been cooped up with our horse.
How do you manage, like, what's the thought process, like you said, in terms of the future and wanting to come back to the States and looking for a contract? You know, like I know this, like even from a goalie coach perspective, talking to guys, there are some openings, but teams are saying we're not even going to interview till October, November because they're not anticipating a season till January. So do you just, I guess if I'm assuming you're not going back to Europe, if you're doing the trip in July, are you just going to kind of gear towards getting ready for a January season and approach it that way, or do you consider going to Europe? These are a lot of tough questions for guys.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Like for me, I'm very comfortable with the career I've had. I've played pro for 10 years. I'm not too stressed out about, what it's going to look like from here on out. But I do have offers in Europe, but I'm saying no for now. And if October, November comes around, and I don't have anything that I like here in the U.S., it's like you can join the second wave of Europe like I did last year. I went in November and do that. So I'm just going to get ready for a hockey season and be ready to go, and hopefully something good domestic comes my way. But if not, maybe see another country, go play in Germany or Sweden or something like that.
I was going to say, especially if you're targeting that sort of, like, I think October, November is when you may have decisions being made, maybe geared towards a January season in North America. And again, we don't know for sure, but at least that provides you, the guys I've talked to over the last little while, the hardest thing about the first month and a half of after the season was canceled is they felt like they had 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and they didn't know what to prepare for. At least this way, you can go away in July. You can go do your things and sort of target that October in terms of ramping up physically and being ready for when those opportunities.
It's like I still work out all the time, but like on ice in shape is like a completely different thing. Like I was sucking wind when I skated the other day, and I was like, I've been riding the Peloton 5 days a week, So yeah, I mean, for me, the timeline is kind of ideal because I'm okay with waiting and seeing what's out there, and then like I said, if I'll really start ramping up the skating in September, October. And then if something good does come up in the US, then I'm ready to rock. Like, let's go. But also if I need to get on a plane the next day and go to Moscow, ready to go. So we'll see what shakes out.
What was that experience like in Austria last year? Like you said, I mean, you can approach these a lot of different ways. It seems like you have the right mindset. The guys I've talked to that have gone over at various points in their career, there's an opportunity to keep playing, be a pro, earn relative to Joe Blow good money, and see things that you might not otherwise get to see.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I'm a big travel guy. And the reason I went to Innsbruck, I had offers all over the world, was because I had driven through it 2 years prior on a European trip with my fiance. And it's the most beautiful city that it's like, I now say Austria is like an underrated, it's like a hidden gem in the world. The country is so beautiful. We lived in the Austrian Alps. She came over, the dog came over, like we just had a great time. The guys were great. And it's a new thing too, to play in Europe where like the imports have to be friends, because there's 10 of us and the rest of the guys are local Austrian guys. And it's like that in every country. So we got like really close. I met a lot of great guys, and we had a great time. Our team was a little below average, but I enjoyed the experience, and I'm very happy I went.
Style of hockey and any different, any takeaways from a goaltending perspective? You know, you made the joke about the Pecorine thing. I remember talking to him after one of the lockouts where he went to the KHL, and he's just like, never again. The reads were so different. The game was so different. And yet we see guys now come back from the KHL and they feel like the patience required to play in that pass, dust it off and pass one more time league.
It drove me nuts, man. It drove me nuts. It took me like 5 games to get used to it, because like, I can't, the thought in my head of like, why didn't he shoot? You know, like, who would pass right now? You know what I mean? Because I'm trained in North American hockey, and this guy would have a breakaway and he'd pass the puck, and I was blown away. After like 4 or 5 games, I got the hang of it, to just like trust nothing and just like, you know, like don't try and think into the future, because like, you don't know what these guys are going to do.
It's like playing like low level shinny. That's like, you know, 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, and they're looking for the fourth guy as the trailer.
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. I remember my first game was in Italy. There's a team in Italy in the league. And I was just like dumbfounded on some of the like plays that happened. Like, I played well. We lost 3-2, but like, I just remember like biting on everything. You know, like 2-on-1, the D completely has the other guy. This guy basically has a breakaway. And I'm like, oh, no way, he's not shooting. I'm like dialed in on him, and he tries to sauce it through to the other guy. I'm like, what are you doing?
It reminds me of playing a charity event and having Henrik Sedin on a breakaway, and I should have known that he was going to deke to one side and then try and pass to the other because he's Henrik Sedin. But you would never expect that in an actual pro game playing versus a charity game. Oh, man. And I hear a lot of those stories. As you get adjusted to it, though, can you find positives? Because if there's one thing we've seen in the North American game and the NHL game is that, you know, we we're talking to Braden Holtby a couple of weeks ago for a webinar we did, and it's not just East-West anymore. It's East-West-East. And you have to be able to beat plays mostly on your feet whenever you can in order to keep up with this game. The patience required to wait things out over there, as much as it's not the same game, can you find benefits that you think you could bring back to North America if you get that opportunity?
Well, I think it's the things that you learn there are for there.
Okay.
So like for me, I had to like change my depth, you know, like, you know, 6 inches back. But then you also pick up tricks, like you look up the roster. Who are the North Americans? Know who they are. They're going to shoot. The Austrians are going to pass, you know, stuff like that. And so you learn little tricks. But I mean, I would say it might have helped my footwork a little bit, just like, you know, back and forth so much, which would obviously help me here too. But I would have to adjust a little. I could take my 6 inches back, because, you know what everyone's doing, and you can plan off like where your D is and everything. So, I just remember being so frustrated like the first couple games.
Yeah, you're definitely not the first one to share those frustrations from a goalie standpoint going over there.
Yeah, I was in the Enroth when I went over, and he was like warning me, like telling me, he's like, you know, this is how it's going to be, and you know, don't freak out, like you'll get the hang of it.
Oh man. Let's slide it back here a little bit, like rewind quite a bit. Because obviously every time we've talked, I feel like I come away learning things and just enjoying the conversation about the position. How'd you fall in love with it first? What drew you to goaltending? How did Scott Darling end up between the pipes?
My dad was a goalie.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I used to go watch him play men's league, you know. And so that was the initial. And then I loved the gear. I, you know, loved it. When I was a little kid, we lived in like Washington State, like kind of by Seattle. And he took me up to Vancouver and took me to like this huge goalie store. I was probably 5 years old to get my first like real set of gear myself. They were like Felix Potvin replica Kohos. And like since then, I've been a gear fanatic and just like a goalie nerd.
Oh, you want to hear a funny story? I'm trying to do the math. So we're talking like mid 90s there, right?
It would have been like 94.
Yeah, right around. Yeah, you know what, man? Like that is probably, they're on a little hiatus right now because the world is paused, including business. But that's the hockey shop, Source for Sports. That is almost guaranteed that was the sponsors of this podcast out of the gate.
Well, there you go. There's a free ad for
there
you.
You go.
I remember it was Source for Sports.
Oh, and that's hilarious.
I was like 5 or 6, and I sucked at forward. I played forward from 3 to 5. I was useless, and then they put me in the net. We had like a team where like you traded who played goalie, and they're like, yeah, you're better off. You just stay there. And then once I actually just consistently started playing goalie, it took me up there because we lived in Tacoma at the time. And yeah, I got those cool maple leaf Podden pads, and I've been like a goalie gear freak ever since.
That's awesome. Now, the progression from there, once you fall in love with it, once you start playing goaltending exclusively, was there a guy you emulated on the ice? At what point because we see it nowadays, Scott, you kind of would have been right around the beginning of this trend where, goalie coaches at a really young age, guys working with position-specific coaches and specialists as young as 6 and 7. Were you just out there playing? When did it become something where, other people were introducing technical elements to you, where you started thinking the game differently versus maybe just imitating a guy on TV? And if it was a guy on TV, who was it? Was it Belfour?
Well, my guy was at Belfour.
Oh, yeah.
Big fan. But yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I didn't really have like a goalie coach. If it was anyone, it was my dad who was my goalie coach. And then, but I mean, even until I was 29, he'd say, why don't you just stand up on the post, like Marty Brodeur did it, I'm like, no, Dad, let's go on the reverse VH, okay?
Now, listen, does your dad have a lot of accounts on Twitter? Because we see a lot of that on Twitter.
Yeah, no.
Why doesn't he just stand up? Well, post-integration was invented for a reason.
Yeah. But then when I was probably 14, I think, I started going out to the East Coast every summer to stop at goaltending. And I did that I did the 2-week camp until I was 18. And then I got so close with Brian DeCord and the people who worked there that I started living out there and working at the camp from 19 until 26, probably.
Nice.
Pretty much until I won the cup. I'd stay out there for 2 months and I'd work there and then
spend your summers.
Because like Corey Snyder is like, he's like the staple guy there. And like, he's like his goalie mind is next level. So like, I loved skating with him. And then it was like me, him, and Mike Condon. And we were like, that was our little crew. And Joe Canada skated there.
There's a lot of guys that came out of that. That's I was going to say out of that school. Stopping Brian DeCord.
Yeah, I mean, Raycroft went there. Like when I was younger, it was like being able to be on the ice with all these D1 goalies for me was like, crazy. You're 14, you're on the ice with the goalie from Michigan, BC, Miami, Ohio, Boston, everything. And then it was cool to see it come full circle where you're the guy who's out there. Because like when I remember the first time I went, I was like, is that Andrew Raycroft? Like the actual Andrew Raycroft, like Rookie of the Year, Boston Bruins. And then, you come back the next summer, like I still did it. I think until last year was the first year I didn't live out there. 2 years ago, actually. You win the cup and you come back and you're that guy. And you're out there teaching the kids and like they're all staring at you, like kind of funny, like the way I used to stare at like Razor, kind of funny. And like you stare at Corey, kind of funny like that, just like, so it was a cool, like full circle experience.
Mean that much more having been on the other end of it, knowing what those kids are going through and how they're feeling?
Like me, like I'm not, like, I don't like that. I don't know how to say it. Like I don't see myself like that. So like I would always like make sure I made the kids talk to me, like just to like let them know like it's cool, man. I get it. Like you don't have to feel weird. Like we can hang. So it was fun. I did it for I think 13 years. That would stop it.
So starting like obviously getting lessons and work, but also working as an instructor.
Yeah, I mean you're playing in the Southern Pro League, and it's like you need a job in the summer. So it's like, okay, season's over. I'm moving to Boston. I'm a goalie coach for the summer. And then, the way the DAC operates, like you work for them, you get a discounted rate to train, and like, so it's kind of a good trade-off, and housing and everything. So like it was the perfect setup for me for years until I was like a grown up and could like support myself.
Now, you talked about the SPHL. Who are from there to the NHL in that path? Who are some of the guys? Obviously Brian was a huge one, big part of it. And obviously for those that don't know, Brian Decord, I mean, doesn't take much of a Google search. He's got a book on goaltending, currently works with the Toronto Maple Leafs, founder of Stop It Goaltending. So like, want to make sure we give a good plug there. Always been very kind to us and generous with his time. But who are some of the other, like working with him, any other voices along that path to go from there and through the ranks, CHL, East Coast, AHL, and move up? Who were some of the, was there anything that changed in your game through different voices? What were some of the guiding influences and takeaways where you're like, this was a really big step for me and it came from this? Or was it just all gradual?
Dak was a big one through the lower levels. Outside of just goaltending, like my agent was great. He's a big time agent, independent guy. And like, usually when you're in the SP, like it's like they don't pick up the phone anymore. And like he was always there for me. So he was huge. And then like some coaches along the way, like Clark Donatelli in Wheeling, Dean Evanson in Milwaukee. And then Dak helped me link up with Mitch Korn. Right. And I signed my 2-way deal with Milwaukee and Cincinnati. And then I got to work with Mitch. I got to go to Nashville camp. And like to this day, Mitch and I are still tight. Like I'm an ear of corn, as he likes to say. He was huge for me, a big advocate for me. That year in Milwaukee was my like stepping stone because Pekka got hurt. So I was in Cincinnati. I got bumped up to Milwaukee, and
20 just for people know, 2013-14. Yeah.
Yeah. And so even though I wasn't a Nashville product, like, or whatever you want to call it,
signing.
My coach, Dean Evanson, let me play. And, that year I led the AHL in every stat other than games played and wins because I only got to play 26 games. So Dean was great to me and Mitch was great to me. And that's the year when it all happened. That's the year when I got my first NHL offers from a bunch of teams. And that's the year I got to sign with the Hawks after that season.
Do you remember anything changing about, was it just approach or like you said, just a constant build up and it was about opportunity and being ready to take it? Or was there any little tidbit where you're like, hey, this piece of advice, or I changed my depth management or anything like that? Or was it just like you said, just a constant gradual thing and now you got this opportunity and you were ready to take advantage of it?
Yeah, it was gradual. But then even the next year when I started in Rockford, one of my favorite goalie coaches I've ever had is Andrew Allen. He's the man. Like, I love that guy. We had so much fun because we had Michael Layton, who was at that time 12 years pro, NHL, KHL, you name it. Like, he's done it all. So it was me, Layton, and Andrew Allen. Like, we sat in the video room for hours, just like not only talking goaltending, but just like chopping it up. And then we got to talk about every goalie coach that Mike worked with throughout his career because he played for so many different teams. And Andrew was so much fun to work with. And like, he was the best at like a dialogue. Like, tell me why you think you should do this, and I'll tell you why. And like, our back and forth was unbelievable. And like, he really got me prepared that season for my time with the Blackhawks.
I was going to say, he's one of our favorites as well. And a guy we've had every time, especially when he was with the Sabres, they would come through, he'd make the time. And, one of those guys where you have a conversation and you're always learning something about goaltending. And
and just the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that guy.
Now it's funny because you mentioned Layton, and one of the conversations I remember having with him probably a little bit before then was because he went through some stretches where he bounced around. And that can be, you talk about these dialogues with goalie coaches, that can be one of the challenges when you get moved around is each new guy feels like they want to add something. You're caught between, this is my foundation and that might pull me away from it. But this guy wants me to do it. And he's the one that makes the decision on whether I start. That can be those can be finding that balance as a goaltender and finding the relationships that work are important. Finding that balance with a guy where it might not be perfect. That can be tough.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate. I think the biggest run-in I ever had was with Jimmy in Chicago. My first camp, I showed up with the I don't know if you've seen the pictures. Like my first set of equipment from when I was in Chicago was like all red sock graphic with like the white and black. He made me switch to white, so I reversed it into white pads because he's French Canadian, like all that. And I think that was the biggest thing. I was like, okay, I don't want to be mad at me. I'll switch my gear. But other than that, my goalie coaches have been great to me.
Well, there are some teams in the NHL where it's like they have rules about certain parts of the pads got to be white. So,
yeah.
I mean,
that was the first time I ever heard of it. I was like, oh, am I in trouble?
Meanwhile, you're a gear guy throughout all this. You got Chris Joswiak setting you up with sweet Brian sets, and you got to change the color out. That can't be fun. Do you take pride in having a look that jumps? That do you go back with Jaws? Do you do your own designs? Do you try and come up with new things?
Jaws is the best, man. I say I'm Brian's for life because when I was playing in Wheeling in the East Coast League, I was on the ECHL contract. I couldn't afford new gear. My team wouldn't buy me gear, and I knew Jaws. And I texted him, and I was like, hey, like, I need a favor. Like, I know it doesn't look good right now. And I said this to him. I was like, but I'm on my way up. I promise. Like, I will wear Brian's the rest of my life if you help me. And he sent me a free set of pads. And I'm Brian's for life and have been ever since. And like him and I are tight. He's a man and he's super creative. Like I always wear the initial graphic for my first set, but then him and I just like brainstorm like what can we do for like the other ones for the season, and like always comes up with cool stuff. Like even this year for Europe, like we had to get creative because of the logos that they put on the pads.
Right.
And I look like a Christmas tree this season with my red pads and this big green sticker down the front of some like gas company in Austria or something.
Now he probably would have found a way to make it work. They actually make a Scott Darling spec glove. Did you even know that your spec had become a thing? Like I think it's actually a stock model now with the squared off edge of the glove.
I worked on that like big time.
How can you walk me through that process? As much as you can in terms of what it was like to sort of, this is what I need in my glove, and working with a guy like Jaws to go from this is what I feel to this is now a glove that they make and sell at retail. That's pretty cool.
Because for me, I had a hard time switching because I wore Brian's pads and blocker, but I wore a blonde glove.
Okay.
All the way up until the NHL. Because Jeff Zadkoff gave me one of his gloves when I played in Wilkes with him, and it was the best glove ever. And, once I got to the NHL and you're talking about having like a sponsorship agreement, stuff like that, and I just said, Jaws, make me this glove. And like, it took about 12 tries. I have like a pile of gloves in my house, but then he got it right and they nailed it. And then now that's the one. It was like newer, better version of the old Bond Vision. Like I think it's like the 750 or something.
7700 probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we like went through like, trial and error and like made that one better. And that's the model that they use now. So shout out to Jeff Zadkoff for making that, because he had like a custom version of that glove, So
and now you've been immortalized in goalie gear culture history.
Yeah. I mean, what more can you ask for?
Name on the cup, glove that has your name on it as the Darling spec.
Yeah.
That's it.
I have man.
Hey, listen, I just wanted to, we've been on here a long time already, and there's so many great takeaways that I know young goalies are going to jump all over. Just wanted to catch up on the last couple of years before Austria. Like, going from Chicago to Carolina as a free agent, you were probably highly sought after, or you never really got there because you got traded and signed the deal. Like, what was that process like? How tough was that? Especially when you had, we just talked about winning a cup in your hometown, to get to do all of this in your hometown and then to have to leave sort of, I don't want to say comfort, but everything that was sort of built into Chicago for you. Was that a tough part of the process?
It was.
How do you look back?
It was tough. I wanted to stay in Chicago, obviously, but
some guy named Crawford.
Yeah, this terrible goalie named Corey Crawford ruined my life. But no, I knew it was coming. But the day I got the phone call that I got traded, it was a shock. I'm sitting there eating lunch, and Stan Bowman calls me, and then you find out you're going to Carolina, And then you have a whole nother list of questions that come up because you're like, okay, I have a month until free agency and I could be a free agent. And it's like you go down that rabbit hole with your agent, like what do you want to do? There's other teams that are interested. Do you want to risk it? Because that summer was like me and Bish were like, we were the two like goalies on the market that people were talking to.
Yep.
But then, you start doing the contract stuff. And I mean, for me, I played for the Louisiana Ice Gators, so like, I'm just so thrilled that like the Carolina Hurricanes want me to be on their team enough to trade for me and offer me a contract. And, I was like, that's it. It's good enough for me. So yeah, signed there and then moved out to Raleigh and, say things didn't go great. That first season, I kind of just like got off to a bad start and I never caught up. That's how I explain the first season because I started trying too hard and then I was like, the example I use is like quicksand. The harder you fight, the faster you sink, kind of thing. And that's how I tried my first year there.
And that's goaltending, right? Like we don't get to dictate the play. You can't go out and throw a big hit to get you into a game. Like that's the hardest part about this is the harder you try, usually the worse it goes. It's tough.
I was going to be comfortable. I was overdoing it. I was forcing stuff and I wasn't playing like myself. And then the next summer is the first summer I didn't train with Dak. I stayed in Raleigh and like got in the best shape of my life and trained harder than I've ever trained. And I'm feeling great. Training camp's going great. Last game of training camp, I tear my hamstring. And while I'm injured, because they know I'm going to be out for a while, they claim McElhenney off waivers, and McElhenney plays amazing.
Yep.
And like he's the greatest guy. Like I'm so happy for him, and I'm happy that led to him getting that great deal with Tampa Bay. But you're in the trainer's room watching your job go out the window. And then the next thing you know, you're in Charlotte. And then the next thing you know, you're in Austria. So that's kind of how things went for me. But no bitter feelings. Like I said earlier, like I'm very proud of my 10 years pro and hopefully have a couple left in me wherever it may be. But yeah, that's kind of how Raleigh was for me.
I was just going to say, it sounds like lessons learned in terms of, like you said, you can't chase it. You can't make it, like it's a constant process. And you sound like you're at peace with your game too. Like not like just your career, but like you feel you're in a good spot in terms of your game and know what needs to happen for you to play well at this point as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's as much as with all the uncertainty, what's the plan in the near future after, the travel ends? Will you train in Chicago or do you look at going back to have an opportunity to work in Boston, or is that just too tough a commute with your life all settled in Chicago? Right now?
I'm getting married soon. And like we talked about, I got 2 massive dogs. And I'm lucky I can see the United Center from my house. So the practice rink is right there. So it's easy to train there. And even the Hawks staff is still great to me. Like if I need stuff, I can still go to the rink and see the guys and, get ice time and stuff like that. So it's a great organization here. And once a Blackhawk, always a Blackhawk type of thing. And they help me out so I can train here. And we'll see, like I said, it's crazy times in the world right now. So just kind of got to wait and see and stay in shape and see what comes up in a few months.
Do you still talk to, I remember talking, there was a group of guys with, Garrett and obviously Mike Condon you go way back with. Do you still have that group where there's group chats, group texts, everybody sort of grows up and like you said, you're getting married, grows in different directions, but they still your boys?
I was talking to Sparks yesterday. And then, Condi Bear, and then even from like that camp out there, like I don't know if you know Joe Canada, if you're familiar with him.
He was in the Canucks organization for a little while, and we should give a plug to the GGSU camps as well. We're not ignoring them on purpose, but you did those camps.
He just killed it over the Allsvenskan and signed the SHL. Like he ripped that league to shreds. So I'm happy for him. But yeah, we still talk. We're all still friends. The wife lets me talk to him, so it's okay.
Do you compare notes on is it just buddy, or are you guys like still comparing notes on goaltending? Is this still part of the conversation, that passion for the position? or is it more of an escape from it?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, more for us, it's kind of like where we're all at right now. It's more like, hey, what do you think I should do career wise? Like, do you know teams? Like, teams need goalies or stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Sparks, he's like, let's go rollerblading. I was like, any day, dude, come downtown, and because he's
in the area, yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sure we'll get into some like serious goalie talks when he comes down for a rollerblade.
Nice. Hey, listen, Scott, we took way too much of your time, which is a habit of mine. Darren Millard is going to laugh at me that I didn't even get a last question. And normally I'm famous for a last question. And I still managed to run this thing up to 50 minutes. So, dude, we really appreciate the time. It's great to catch up with you. Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks for catching everybody up.
Good to see you.
Woody, I'm going to be honest. There's times that we do bug you about one more question, but that was a conversation with Scott that you could have asked 35 one more questions, and we wouldn't have been all over you because it was just it was that incredible of a discussion.
And of course, it's the one where I didn't ask one more question. So clearly, my sort of read on things is not the same in terms of how to manage. But hey, we got through, and there were so many good. My favorite though is like I'm not structured. Where he's comparing him and Bishop being the two UFA goalies. And he's talking about Bishop's more of a positional and get hit goalie, and he's trying to describe his styles. Scott doesn't play quite as structured a style, and I'm more like Pekka Rinne, a bad Pekka Rinne. Like, I thought that was just
awesome.
Obviously, you're not a bad Pekka Rinne, but I thought that was just hilarious for him to say it and describe it that way. He definitely plays with a little more. There's a little less structure in Scott's game, and yet when he was on, and as he was for the first 3 years in Chicago, almost every night, man, he was good.
I covered that series, the Nashville-Chicago set, when Chicago came out from the studio, but I was part of the crew that had that series. I don't remember us ever discussing that he hadn't played in a playoff game before. Like that was wild.
Yeah. To imagine your first taste of playoffs, other than, as he said, giving up 10 at the University of Maine.
Yeah.
Like 5 years later, you get your first taste of the playoffs. And it's Chicago, and that rivalry, you covered that series, like that Chicago-Nashville rivalry, maybe it's died down a little bit, but that was heated at the time. That was a big rivalry, and to get thrust into the middle of that with the expectations of that Blackhawks group, and to be the catalyst to spark the turnaround that leads all the way to a cup in your hometown. Like I said, like Disney, you send that script to Disney, and they're like, no.
And he's playing against the team that gave him his shot, that really broke through in the minor leagues when he wasn't even their property, when he was playing with Milwaukee.
Was that something you knew at the time? I didn't realize it until he mentioned it.
No.
But yeah, so these are guys he was roommates with Philip Forsberg, and now he's charged with shutting them down.
Makes it sound like I don't do any research at all, but it just never
me neither.
Never looped in. And Dean Evison was the coach, and we're big fans of Dean, and he's now coaching the Minnesota Wild as the interim head coach. Dean's brother was my 12-year-old head coach in AAA hockey. So that's a tie in there. Good old Heavy Evison was oh man, I miss that guy. He was a wonderful human being. But yeah, all this synergy and he's in the net getting his opportunity and against his former roommate. It was wild to hear that story.
Yeah, it was, and like I said, a lot of those things I was not aware of, as much as I think we've got dialed in. When you hear new things 5 years later about it, you're like, wow.
Well, that's why we have these conversations. That's why we bring you this content. It's not just for you, the listener, and you, the subscriber. We learn so much through these conversations and our love of the position and the goalie's world and the environment that we spend so much time in. One more plug for the parents article and just before we go, an opportunity where people can get this article that you posted.
Well, I mean, it's at InGoal Premium, and it's going to be a regular column where I just sort of share my thoughts on various topics related to goaltending parents. It's not at all intended to be me speaking from the pulpit and telling you how to do things. I just want to spark some conversation, some dialogue, some discussion, I think the goaltending parent community is a pretty unique one and a very interesting one. And we all feel a little bit alone at the rink quite often. So it's a chance for us to come together as a smaller subset of the goalie union, because even though many of us are not in the net, we're still part of this great community. And so I wanted to give a bit of a catalyst. So visit us at InGoal Premium and check it out, and hit the comment section. Let us know what you think.
I want you to do one on photography. You take some pictures when you're at the rink, and I want you to do just a basic introduction on how to take good pictures of your son or daughter at the rink, whether they're forwards or goaltenders. And I just think it'd be
funny enough. We actually have one at the old InGoal, which I can probably repurpose a little bit and add to myself.
Technology might have changed.
No, but the concepts are actually very similar, and it was done by a photographer out of Chicago, actually. Nick, I'm going to get your last name wrong. Ulaveri, I believe it is. He is a spectacular photographer in Chicago. The landscape work he does, I would say it's downtown landscape work from high above the city in skyscrapers. It is absolutely spectacular, and he did an article on how to shoot your son or daughter with a camera at the local hockey rink. But it's actually probably the most viewed article at the old ingoalmag.com, because it got picked up by a few photography websites where people were just saying, hey, you might want to take a look at this, and constantly getting hit up in the archives. But yeah, no, happy to refresh that at some point.
That'd be a lot of fun, because we're all like to take pictures of our sons and daughters when they're out there, and just a little bit of tips on what to do and how to go about it. Woody, great job today, pal. That was outstanding. From your admitting that you were wrong at the start, and you made me wrong at the end. Who knows about goaltenders coming out of this pause, because we don't know anything right now. To the conversation with Scott Darling, that was awesome. And Hutch, looking forward to catching up on that article about the hockey academies and the content that's going to come your way from the Western Hockey League, Hockey Canada Goalie Symposium. We'll keep you up to date on that. For Hutch and Woody, I'm Darren Millard. You are a goaltender. That means you are our darling on InGoal Radio, the podcast.